Hello again. I'm back, and after having a few days to marinate on Ice Queendom, I was finally ready to put my thoughts to screen and write this episode. But before we get stuck in, I'd just like to thank my wonderful patrons for making these episodes possible. Links below. Now, on to the question of the hour. Is RWBY Ice Queendom good? Yes. Okay, outro music. Okay, but seriously, I do like it, and while I have some critiques, I'll get them out of the way quick and then unpack the story thus far. The first critique is sort of 50% good, 50% bad, because they have really tightened the story and made it super efficient in order to cover V1 so effectively in just 3 episodes. And overall, it does a great job, but it does leave Team RWBY and Juniper's friendship as feeling a bit tacked on. Secondly, I do wish we'd gotten more of Blake's perspective on the White Fang, and from Weiss's side, more focusing on her projecting her issues with Jacques onto the Faunus. However, there's still plenty of time left, so we'll see where they go with it. Finally, is the use of a dream catcher as Xion's weapon. I get the choice, but there's a lot of complicated issues with that regarding appropriation and non-natives profiting off such iconography, but it's also not a one-sided issue either, as I've seen some Native Americans say they like it while others didn't. Ultimately, it's certainly not my place to say, but it still felt worth noting. Okay, with that done, let's get into the positives and the show overall. RWBY Ice Queendom is an anime AU side story kind of deal that's first 3 episodes reorganize and retell the first volume while introducing a new character, Xion the Nightmare Hunter and canonically non-binary icon, as well as introducing the Nightmare, a type of Grimm that starts as a seed implanting itself into people, feeding off their negative emotions to induce nightmares and devour their aura to create other Grimm. Jean and Weiss get infected during initiation, and slowly the Nightmare's influence grows. Juniper are helped by Xion to enter Jean's nightmare to essentially exorcise the Grimm, with this being used to introduce the premise. Meanwhile, the 3rd episode ends with Weiss falling into her own nightmare realm as she continues to grapple with her toxic upbringing. As it is, I really like and am intrigued by Xion. Everything about them feels so mystical, I almost thought they were a heroic AU version of Salem, and the imagery association with their powers is beautiful. The Nightmare is also another really good Grimm added to the stable. It works in their ties to negative emotions, can't even be properly killed, and presents a similar, more existential kind of threat like the apathy. Now, circling back to the start, while the episodes thus far are retelling, they do really tighten the story in some very clever ways. Blake and Weiss's trailers are integrated into the main plot, letting us see more of Weiss's home life and the complicated dynamics therein, as well as establishing how Blake lived after escaping Adam and seeing him be all gung-ho and stupidly murdery as he always was, along with being, like a lot of abusers, i.e. convinced his victim will return and unable to act out in public. We do miss Yang and Ruby's trailers, but those will likely have minimal bearing on the plot, so it makes sense. Other clever decisions include skipping the sleepover at Beacon to instead make the airship ride into the Emerald Forest. This also means Weiss's contention with the team starts due to RWBY and Yang criticizing the STC after seeing the newscast regarding the protest. This helps firmly create a divide between Weiss and her future teammates and introduces the basis for the future conflict smoothly. This also means no jaundice, and in fact Jaune seems much more affable this time round. Similarly, Sun seems to more stumble on Blake over following her around in secret and is generally less vexing. In many ways, little things like how Pyrrha and Jaune's first meeting goes really do a good job of addressing some of the first volume's weaknesses, and it feels very much like what a more experienced RT would do now. We also get some fun added context, like RWBY was in Vale with the rest of her family to see Yang off to Beacon and was out shopping for a present but kept getting distracted, thus leading her to Dusk Till Dawn. I like this because it makes everyone involved feel like family and like getting into Beacon is a real event. Plus, any and all scenes between RWBY and Yang are adorable and wholesome. Plus, we had Yang at Summer's grave and addressing her as Mum, my heart. I have seen some complaints about RWBY saying she didn't do well at Signal outside of fighting and that this was done just to prop up Yang. I can sort of see where they're coming from, but given RWBY started doodling in Port's class and then dozing, I think the issue is less a lack of intelligence and more a matter of focus. Classroom learning doesn't suit everyone. Plus, nearly anything that talks up Yang's intelligence, given how often she's talked down about in the fandom, is liable to get my seal of approval. Yang's a nerd! Beyond that, as I said, I really liked seeing the screwed up dynamics of the Schnee family. Everyone's complicated relationship was introduced so smoothly and in such a small amount of time. Seeing Blake roughing it before getting to Beacon was a solid detail, and I also love that they kept Glinda as super tall. Ty's like a head shorter than her and Ozpin, I love it. Blake and Yang's interactions remain adorably balanced and cute, even the VAs carry themselves like Barbara and Aaron. Plus, Yang is much more overt in being on Blake's side after Weiss and her's fight, which is a very good detail to see. I also think it helped set up Weiss's initial but temporary turn regarding Blake, i.e. focus on the person, not the organisation. On more serious topics, I think they did a better job here establishing Pyrrha's fame and Weiss's massive celebrity crush on her. Because seriously, Weiss is much more aggressive in her efforts to befriend Pyrrha and otherwise being heavily zeroed in on her, and is more overtly flawed in general, but in a way that flows with the original series quite smoothly. It makes for interesting watching, as her initial focus hasn't diminished, even as it clashes with her circumstances, with her own team, and helps fuel the nightmare. There's also some nice and heartbreaking foreshadowing, like Yang being annoyed Blake's want to run from the grim, i.e. run away, or how the lights flickering and dying in the narration focuses on Pyrrha. As an aside, there's a really fascinating interview done by some of the team leaders, including Gen Urobuchi, on their views of the original series and their spin on it. So as to say, they really like RWBY and had a lot of insights to share on their own experiences working on it, and it's linked below. Starting to wrap up, the music is fantastic. It does a great job of catching that RWBY feel and integrates it really smoothly with the action. It's maybe a bit less dominant in some scenes than normal RWBY, but I don't consider that a weakness or a strength. It's just a stylistic difference. Also, the animation is really gorgeous. I was worried it wouldn't translate well, but this is just so smooth and crisp in motion. The fights themselves are fluid and impactful, with a great sense of framing and creativity. The voice acting is also really solid, everyone's voice feels fitting, and it's interesting to see how some terms and interactions are adapted via language. All in all, RWBY Ice Queendom proves to be an entertaining watch. I kept getting caught up in the intensity and excitement of the moment during my watch, and it very much feels like a love letter to RWBY as a whole. And yeah, that's my first impression. Thanks for tuning in! If you would like to help support these episodes and get early access to scripts, videos and stories, please hit up my Patreon linked below. If you'd like to commission 3D art, follow the link to my Ko-fi or Twitter and we can chat. Thanks for stopping by.